I'm starting the recording right now.
Done.
Okay, chalo. Hello, good morning. I'm Raj Narayan. I represent CXO today. And today we have with us Sugata Halder, who would be discussing issues related to the MSMEs in a new edition of MSME Talks. Before we start, let me just introduce you to Halder a little more. He was the associate partner of Management Consultants for Human Capital, MCHC, that has domain expertise in change management, strategic HR, training in sales and HR domains, and talent management. Sugata is a regular speaker at various seminars and conclaves, and his pet subject is the future of work and workplaces, which is what excites me because that's exactly what we are going to talk about, although with reference to the MSMEs. He has been the Chief People Officer in Darjeeling Organic Tea Limited, Country HR Head for Century Plyboards India, and Country Head for Bharti Airtel Limited in Bangladesh. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Sugata Halder. Welcome, Sugata.
Hi, Raj, and greetings to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. So very simply, I just want to understand your views on what is happening with the Indian economy at two levels. One, there was a sort of slowdown of sorts before the COVID, and COVID seems to have actually messed things up even worse. So how do you think, how bad do you think things are, and how do you get this back on rails from your perspective?
That's a difficult one, Raj, to be honest. I don't know, to the best of my knowledge, there is one stop solution, one magic wand solution that at least I know of, because times are not normal. We keep hearing jargons like new normal and all, and I don't know whether there is more reality in that new normal than now. To answer your question, I'll put it in a couple of levels. Since we are discussing MSME in particular, see, MSME, I guess we have to first understand what are the key challenges that they are facing, because if you don't identify them correctly, I think solutions will also be misplaced, however well-intentioned. Yeah. So first and foremost, MSMEs in India being a critical part of the Indian economy, if not the most critical part even now, I think are suffering because of COVID and had been so a little while earlier also because of the slowdown. They have a couple of challenges. One, which is purely on the demand side because of COVID. Now, the demand side of the market has gone down, I think mostly across all sectors, except a few maybe. So I think most of the MSMEs are facing a challenge on the demand side. The consumer demand, the customer demand has gone south. That's one part. The other side is that there is the supply side challenge in which they are unable to find enough liquidity in the market to finance themselves and continue the work, if I may so say. Let the fire burning, so to say, let the machines run. So I think we have to understand that what needs to be done on both sides to be able to really help the MSMEs. So I'll keep the answer brief therefore. On the one hand, as far as the liquidity side is concerned, I think the only hope in hell right now is that the government has to step in. And because they have to provide liquidity on three levels. One, upfront in terms of support, which is through preferably more lenient terms for bank loans and equivalent, just not bank. Any credit availability for MSMEs have to be revisited vis-a-vis the way we have it today, all policies. The credit policy, whether it is through banks or elsewhere, through organized sector or otherwise, I think need to be A, revisited, and B, maybe controlled and executed at least for the next 2 years till it reaches a threshold of normal momentum of the way it is run, the whole credit system. So I think that's a big requirement, one. Second, if there are MSMEs with a decent track record of the past pre-COVID times, their existing or already running loans and credits, etc., with various financial institutions should, I think, be looked at in terms of their repayment schedules far more. I wouldn't use the word leniently, but far more in a different way, through a different prism. because these are cost pressures for the MSMEs. And on the one hand, the liquidity intake has to be better. On the other hand, existing credits that they already have from the market, from the financial institution, banks, etc., can that be looked at and reorganized and recalibrated and redrafted in the terms, etc.? That's the second piece, especially for those whose credit ratings and market performances have been good. And third, can the government look at policies, relevant ones, not all one size fit all, but specific industry wise, segment wise, to address this whole physical labor issue? Because labor availability in the MSME sector is still a big requirement. Because here I will take a pause and divide in the third part of it my MSME segment into two parts. One which is largely still doing business, and that is the majority, in an offline model, which is a brick and mortar model. And there is that smaller section of MSMEs who have managed to go online and do business largely online, not because of COVID only, but because historically their domain was online. So I would focus more on the third part of what the government can do on the manufacturing and the business which are brick and mortar. Here, I think the availability of physically the labor class or the working people is very important. And given COVID, there has been a lot of physical movement of laborers back and forth. So one is availability. Second, as far as the salary and wages pressure on the MSME owners are concerned, because of employees, staff, and workmen, can that be supported? The government, in fact, has come down some time back with the contribution and waivers of the PF, the revised PF policy, if I may so call it. However, I think that needs to be looked at in a more comprehensive manner, end to end, as to how the government can support MSMEs on the labor, not only labor, employee salary and wage front, to reduce some of the operational cost burdens for MSME. So these are my three top or major critical requirements, according to me.
Okay. Okay, that sounds interesting. Now, I was just wondering, so you mentioned credit, right? Government has set aside, what, 3 lakh crores towards,
Right.
towards, I mean, but then that is the just extension of credit that they have granted just to meet working capital expenses. Now, one of the things having stayed in Bangalore for quite some time now, I mean, I notice is that some of the companies say, you know what, we don't think whatever we were doing earlier, the business model that we were having, it's going to be even functional anymore. Typical example would be the auto components fellows, for example. They are saying, you know what, automobile offtake is less. So auto components automatically will suffer. Now we have the machinery, but we can't find funds to push up some other area of operation or bring in something else. So their machinery is there. Is there something that they can do using the existing machinery? That is the question they have. And if so, if the answer is yes, where do we find funds? Again. So that is another challenge that I seem to be hearing. So is it something that that you
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I can't agree more. Exactly what I mentioned in my first part, that if I look at it in terms of both the demand and the supply side of the challenge, liquidity availability, what you are calling funds, I use the word term liquidity. So I'm saying whether from the government must step in, or should or ought to step in, and not make it a generic rule that, you know, I think it has to be made a little more customized in terms of the sector and the kind of industry, because challenges at the macro level could be similar, but they're not identical. And so I think one level beyond just saying that I would have policy to support or give liquidity, ease liquidity availability, or terms of loans, etc. Should a MSME owner go to the bank or the financial institutions asking for money, the terms can be made more lenient, etc., or relaxed, etc. But I think that is a macro level statement. How specific can we do and go deep down and make it a little more segment and industry specific? I think there lies in details, and the nuts and bolts lie the success of the policy. So just to say, I'll make my terms more relaxed. It might work for industry A and might not exactly work for industry B. So I think making it a little more industry specific would help, because you gave this example of auto component, which is an ancillary industry. Now, if the main auto market is suffering, main players are suffering, the ancillary market is bound to suffer. Now, would the fund availability in that case, and I'm questioning that premise, exactly my point, that would the component manufacturer, who are MSMEs maybe, supposing they get a lot of funds, but if they manufacture auto components, there I come back to my first point, the demand side of the market is still not handled because the demand is just not there. So just by providing supply side solutions, which is liquidity, which is easier terms of loans, which is few other things, that alone will not sort out the problem if there is no corresponding policy on the, or looking at how the demand side can be handled, because that is very segment and industry specific. For the main player in the automobile market, for example, you and I, individual user, are their customers. So can the government do something for them if the demand goes up and up north? Uh, the auto component manufacturers will automatically see a traction because, so I think it's interlinked. And I'm tempted to use a jargon which I use called TOC, theory of constraints. So your chain is as strong as the weakest link. So and they are interrelated. So if you do not look at it holistically, I would submit that it might just remain a piecemeal solution. So I think there is need to look at it in its holistic sense, and within that make it industry and segment specific. That's my take.
Yeah. So
The government incidentally has done a lot, but I think you mentioned about the new funds, etc., that has been set aside, etc. And that's a good positive step. But the question is, since COVID is continuing and God knows shall continue for how long, and the business impact will be that much more and longer. So possibly this or such steps need to be taken. Uh, I wouldn't say more frequently, but needs to be a top of the agenda priority for the government of the day.
yeah. So this brings me to another question. See, for example, one of the things that I have been reading of late has been this, I mean, ban Chinese goods, and then suddenly there was this impact in terms of, for example, vendors of Apple suddenly saying, okay, we are bringing in money to India, we are setting up ancillary units here, and
Correct.
blah, 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 all of that happened. And I happen to know, I work with Amazon very closely, so I happen to know that their freedom sale, the sale that happened earlier this month, it generated substantial revenues for them. And surprise, surprise, a lot of revenues actually came from the smaller cities. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bridge two of the things you mentioned. So demand generation has to happen at a place where there is excess money lying around. I mean, you and I might not think of buying a new car, but I'm sure there are people who would buy a under 15,000 rupee cell phone because the one that they had was probably, it's an end of life for it. So is this what you mean by saying you need to have a larger, bigger approach where you sort of create ecosystems for SMEs to survive, not
Precisely.
just sort of, yeah?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. And that ecosystem, I think rural India is where the MSMEs have a segment of customers where they're largely, if you look at Indian MSME data, a large part of the MSME, what is classified as MSME, are operating out of the hinterlands of India.
Mm-hmm.
In cities, what we see in cities are not really a true picture of all the MSMEs. What we have here are ancillary players to main players, but a significant part of my MSME is still in semi-rural and rural India. Maybe not so much rural, but certainly semi-rural area, town, tier 1, tier 2 cities. And I resonate with what you just said, that therefore, both on the availability of the funds and liquidity, that side, as much as generating demand, they are the hope in hell, if I may so say.
Yeah.
If at all there is a need for demand, and if any, that would largely get generated for the MSME sector in tier 1, tier 2 cities, largely.
Yep.
And because the major metros and the mega metros will always be or largely be the segment for the main players as a potential customer base. However, as you rightly said, that for the 10,000 and below or 15,000 and below cell phone manufacturing units, their demands would largely come from tier 1 or tier 2 cities. I'm not saying they won't sell in metros, they would, but the percentage or the contribution of revenue of their total revenue would largely come from tier 1 or tier 2 cities vis-a-vis metros. So yes, I think that the demand push money has to be made available there.
Mm-hmm.
A, on the business side, and B, on the individual side, because both demand and supply need to match.
Mm-hmm.
So which is why I keep saying that just by putting money into the hands of the manufacturer is just one side of the coin. You have to look at the demand side, because sentiments are down for right reasons. I mean, you can't really blame the government of the day for what has happened.
Yeah.
But having said that, now that it has happened and we have to live with it, uh, possibly there is a strong need to revisit and relook at the demand side also of the economy. Just one other point here, maybe that this is a sudden thought I had. I don't know how practical, but again, because of my own individual background, the kind of background I come from with my corporate background and what I do now, uh, I, I strongly believe in the use of technology. I keep saying that's an imperative. People are today going online. Today, you and I are talking using this online platform. If this was the case, had you and I had to talk, I'm sure it would have been different model if it was 6 months back.
Yep.
If today large part of corporate India is trying to do work, quote unquote, online, uh, it has only happened because COVID, if I may be permitted to use that in an open platform like this, given a kick on our backside to come on, and
Yeah.
therefore we have suddenly woken up to the possibilities of technology.
Yeah.
6 months back, it was going and breaking your head on people saying, please use technology, but no, they won't. I'm not casting any value judgment. All I'm trying to say is that under compulsion or by choice, people have started accepting the need for technology and the
Yeah.
possibilities of technology. Why I give that as a background is because for MSMEs, can the government also, to help them on the demand side, there's another thing they can try and think of, which is help the ones that can be done, not all of them, depending on the kind of business. For example, if it's a manufacturing setup, you can't do much about it, but their go-to market, can the government enable them, give them loans and money, which is specific to, for example, developing a e-market for them.
Yeah.
What I mean to say is that for such MSME players who are not in the classical pure play manufacturing segment, because you can't automate and move online your entire manufacturing system overnight. That's an impractical thing to say right now. However, for those where it is possible, who are largely in the MSME service sector, can their go-to market be, can we help them to move their entire marketing piece from an offline to an online mode? Because in online, they will get far bigger scale, geography agnostic customers. You can reach out to anybody at 1/10 the cost, if not 1/20 the cost.
Yeah.
So scalability is a massive advantage. Can the government provide funds for such specific projects along with expertise also? And that could be another clear opportunity area for help. One is
Mm-hmm.
just to provide money and just to try and boost demand, supply and demand side
Yeah.
support. The other is specifically an operational support, which I'm talking about, A, through money, and B, through expertise of helping MSMEs to, for example, the Amazons of the world and the equivalents of the world are coming to you and I if we are buying things online today because we can't go physically to a store.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens to the roadside MSME Kirana shop? Now,
Yeah.
the question I'm saying is, if he can also, today at best what he can do is, the roadside shop, is provide door-to-door service of his staff, which many of them are doing across the country, I'm sure, maybe within a 2-3 kilometer radius. So that's about it, because he's operating on a brick and mortar model. But if he was supported, enabled to come out with even a rudimentary uh, e-platform, very rudimentary, where support is available, or supposing you're in Bangalore, I'm sitting right now in Kolkata, somebody else we know, a common friend sits in Delhi. Even if you could do it, that Kirana shop owner could provide support because of that, could receive orders from people across the city instead of a 2 kilometer radius. That's a possibility. So these are options. I'm not saying what I'm saying has to be done, or this is the only hope in hell, but these are opportunities we need to explore and brainstorm about. I'm just thinking aloud about one such.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, because I was actually speaking to somebody else on this particular, the same show. I mean, I can share the
Sure.
links with you. He had something similar to say, because he was talking about uh, the digital. I mean, basically going digital. How can actually even small enterprises, micro enterprises, I mean, small and micro actually, medium and they probably are already there.
Medium would still be fairly insulated or largely
Insulated.
insulated.
Yes,
Or would
yes.
have a longer period of absorbing, being able to absorb because their bottom lines are large.
Correct.
I'm talking about maybe those which are 200 crores and below, 100 crores and below,
Yes.
possibly.
Yeah. So he had this concept of digital Swaraj, he called it. So I think you are mentioning, you are the second person on this show to mention that. I mean, he used the word digital Swaraj because I think somebody in the IT industry in Bangalore used it. I mean, in Bangalore we come up with these.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, these are just thinking aloud. Now that we are kind of
Yeah.
discussing it, triggering thoughts. I don't know, good, bad, ugly. I have no idea, but worth a thought, worth a pause. We have a huge startup movement in India now.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
an immediate trigger that came to me right now, unprepared. I'm just saying it upfront and sharing for whatever it's worth. Now, can they be enabled, supported, encouraged by the government to come out? Because we have tremendous talent in our startup pool, the technologies and the new graduates who are graduating out of technology colleges and all are brilliant. Many of them are.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them, interestingly and thankfully, are willing to now explore themselves as entrepreneurs rather than quote unquote run for a job. What
Yes.
at least I'm sure you and I did 25 years back,
Yes.
at least I did when I started my career.
Same here.
So, I envy them now, but I can't kind of rewind to 25 years, unfortunately. But what I meant is, can they be encouraged by the government through some policy, coming back to your core issue of policy support, to develop not something what they only fancy as what will work for them because that suits their imagination, creativity, passion, preference, but also design something which is an e-platform for such MSMEs, give them digital solutions, develop digital solutions from, can we use our huge technology startup junior pool that we have who are doing brilliant work any which ways, can we harness that skill and technology and knowledge and passion and their youth together and link them up with the MSMEs on a one-to-one or a one-to-many basis? I think it's a win-win. The startups get some opportunity to test their model and earn some revenue on a revenue share, and the MSMEs get almost like free of cost. I'm trying to help you understand an ecosystem where MSMEs become the customer to the startup entrepreneurs for a possible digital marketplace which can be designed exclusively customized for that particular MSME. And the VCs could be the fund providers, apart from the government providing an ecosystem supporting policy.
Yes.
So that could be an ecosystem that might be explored. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, so in the US we do have HubSpot, which does something similar.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
I've
so it
spent
could
quite
be
a long time there. I know. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So you know that. So yeah. So I think that pretty much sums up what what I think government should be doing. I mean, whatever it has done is fine. I mean, what I understand, or to summarize, what it means is you need to be sector specific, and you also need to be a little more focused on not just providing funds just for the heck of it, but then also seeing where that is going and what specifically it brings out and how many people are covered by it, if I might say. I
Precisely.
mean, the larger
Absolutely.
the coverage, the better it is, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, just one final thought. I mean, this just came right now, just before I wind up. In way back when we had the situation went tough in the late 90s, we remember the then government coming out with this road network, right? The big infrastructure push. Is it something that you would
Golden
consider?
quadrilateral.
Yes, yeah, we are benefiting now, yes,
Oh,
because the
big
roads are
time.
good, fantastic.
Infrastructure building, I think, is a fundamental to any economy. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
Just not for COVID, and I'm not linking this to COVID. I'm saying
yeah,
that's a fundamental requirement because it helps the economy. That's a no-brainer. So any infrastructure investment is not only a welcome thing, I think it's a necessity, more so now.
yeah,
I think we can just take ourselves back, not many, but maybe a decade, 2008, when the great thing happened in the US,
yeah,
when the bubble burst, so to say. For the next 3-4 years, if you look at data, there was a massive amount of government investment. I use the word investment in generic sense into the economy per se. And I think that that is a similar approach I wouldn't say an identical approach, but a similar approach in principle is required here in different parts of the economy. But specific to MSME, since we were discussing MSME, I was keeping my answer specific to MSME. And to summarize, yes, I think the MSMEs on the one hand would need policies and support on how to get easy funds for their work. One, two, support to ease their current financial loads, which is the current liabilities that they have, which they are already carrying, provided their history of work has been and repayment schedule earlier had been good. Third, can the government look at some policy to support their current employee costs in one form or the other? This is on the one side, on the support side. The other side is, can the government come out with some policies to boost demand, which is sector and segment and industry specific? And in that, we discussed about a specific trigger that suddenly came up is, can we create an ecosystem? Can the government play an enabler role in creating an ecosystem between an MSME and helping them go online to get a wider market and reach, and therefore generate demand automatically through a ecosystem which has startups and VC funding and MSMEs, and put things together with a policy framework that supports that, encourages that, and maybe makes loans easily available to an MSME who goes with an ecosystem project like that, rather than just going and saying, give me money for my business. So these are possibilities, thoughts that one can look at. There are many more, but these are some of the things that I can immediately think of.
Terrific. That was, I think, very nicely put and summarized. Your own words you summarized. Thanks a lot for that. You saved me the trouble. So thank you. Thank you.
Sorry to kind of steal your limelight.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. It's all yours anyways. So thank you. Thank you for being on the show. I'll just disconnect now. We
My
can
pleasure.
For a few minutes. Yeah,
my pleasure. And it was my pleasure. And it was lovely talking to you, Raj.
Thank you. And I'll just stop recording now.